days, this current administration in the state will clock 3 years in office. And at the People Study here, we are looking at the achievements of this government in various sectors of the life of this administration. This morning, we are looking at the transportation sector, and we have in the studio joining us this morning the Honorable Commissioner for Transportation in the state, Engineer Gbenga Dairo, is our guest this morning. We want to look at the last 3 years of this administration in the area of transportation. Good morning, Honorable Commissioner.
Good morning.
Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. It's always very good to hear it from the horse's mouth, and that's why we are here this morning. Transportation under this administration in the last 3 years, we want to look at when you set out as a government, the vision that you had for this sector. How much of that have you actually made?
Good morning, viewers. Good morning to you both. It's my pleasure to join you this morning to explain what His Excellency has done in the transport sector over the past 3 years. I think when the governor took office, he was quite clear that his mission was to transform the economy of Ogun State and to improve the prosperity of the citizenry of Ogun State. And it became very clear to him also that the Ministry of Transportation was established for the very first time in the history of Ogun State, speaking to his own desire to promote transportation as a driver and engine of economic growth in Ogun State. So it's a new thing, a new development, and the last, the ministry has been in existence now for about 2 years, really, not 3 years, if I may say so.
Okay.
And in the first year of the establishment of the ministry, the COVID pandemic struck. So for the very first year, really, we were somewhat constrained in terms of how the transport sector may, in fact, drive the governor's ambition to improve the economy of the state. Nevertheless, as a ministry, during that period, we very quickly turned our attention to dealing with the outcome and the fallout of the pandemic, to promote all the protocols necessary to ensure the safety of our citizens, particularly in the transport sector. The mission of the ministry is clear, is to safeguard and monitor and manage and plan a transport sector in Ogun State that provides mobility and accessibility to all the citizens of Ogun State, to all visitors to Ogun State, and all those who work in Ogun State, and indeed all those who visit Ogun State, and to provide such mobility and accessibility in a way that is safe and also affordable. So in the first year, notwithstanding the COVID pandemic, as a ministry we began to prepare for post-pandemic, post-COVID, so that when that period went over, we were able to hit the ground running. And so the ministry was formalized, was established, capacity was built within the ministry, the sector law was drafted. We worked with the United Kingdom Foreign and Commonwealth Development Office to develop a policy for transportation in Ogun State. We worked with the Olabisi Onambanya University to develop a transport master plan for Ogun State during that period. So as soon as 2021 came to being, then we began to the actualization of some of the elements of the policy that we developed with the UK partners and indeed with the OOU. All of this, of course, culminated in the launch of the Transport Master Plan in April, that was last month. And now we have in Abeokuta, for the very first time, formal operations of bus services in the pilot scheme that we're operating between Itaoshi and Adata. We are in partnership with Lagos State to extend the railway project into Ogun State. We're developing stations at Agbado, at Ijoko, and at Kagela. We're also working with Lagos State.
So what did you say you're doing at Agbado?
We're developing railway stations, urban railway stations.
Okay,
yes.
okay.
Metro rail stations.
I'm hearing that for the first time.
Are you ready? Wow. Yes, maybe some of the criticism that could be leveled against us is that we haven't truly publicized enough some of our activities in the transport sector. This is perhaps one reason why I'm here today. So we are doing that. We're also working with Lagos State to develop a bus mass transit project between Shagamu and Lagos to serve the significant population of our people who live in Moweba for access.
But that's yet to take off.
It's yet to take off. It's at a planning stage. But this year, before the end of this administration, that is like, infrastructure works will begin. On that, I'm happy to say. So there are a number of things that have been happening in the transport sector, soft and hard things that have been happening, all of which are critical and important to developing the transport sector in our state. The cargo airport, for example, you'll be familiar with.
Oh, yes, yes.
Development, a number of several road projects.
But when you're talking about transportation, there's no way you won't talk about road infrastructure.
Exactly.
Yes, the state government is actually trying its best, even working on inherited, abandoned road projects. Kudos to this administration for that. But let me quickly take you to one axis, which borders a lot of people, and that's because of the number of people that use that plies that route. That's the Songo, this old road.
Yeah,
yes, it's a federal government road, and there was a time the minister came to Ogun State.
Yeah.
What has been done so far to ease the stress of road transporters, the users and others?
Well, as you already pointed out, it's a federal road, and therefore any intervention there has to be done in collaboration with the federal authorities. This is one particular road that is important and prioritized by His Excellency Prince Dr. Abeokuta, and has engaged severally with the authorities at Abuja to see what needed to be done to, in the first instance, rehabilitate that particular road. And as we speak today, contractors are on site actually repairing that road. Even before today, the state government itself had deployed significant resources to ensuring the road was motorable. And only last weekend, I was in discussion with my colleague in the Ministry of Works and Infrastructure, the commissioner there, about ongoing activity in the area and how we will ensure that we create an environment suitable for the contractors to continue their work without so much disturbance by people who operate in that area. So work is ongoing. It's critical, it's important, it's prioritized as far as His Excellency is concerned. That particular corridor is also one that we have identified as an important public transport corridor. You may be aware that Lagos State has developed a bus rapid transit system between Oshodi and Abeokuta. It's one of the projects we're working with Lagos State to extend that BRT to water. Sometime in, I think it was in 2021, the Lagos Ogun Joint Development Commission initiative was established by the governors of Lagos and Ogun State. And that initiative is basically to cement cooperation between both states in issues that cross-border issues,
And is
including
it recording
transportation.
successes so far?
Yes, this project I just mentioned, extending that project from Abeokuta to water is one of them. The one along Mowe, which I mentioned earlier, is one of them. The stations we are developing at Agbado, at Tijoko, at Kajolaifo is another that speaks to that initiative. We're working with the TRACE within Ogun State and LASMA are working along the border areas between Lagos and Ogun to ensure there is consistency in enforcement of and compliance with traffic rules and regulations. So there's a lot of collaboration between both states as a result of the Lagos Ogun Joint Development Commission.
Yeah, well, we admit the challenges that COVID-19 actually posed, not just Ogun State, so other parts of the country, in fact, globally. Now, when you look at this grand plan that Ogun State government has, the policies, they are just coming out they have not totally come out in their full majesty. That would mean that this government will need another 4 years. We're not talking politics now, but then let's assume this government does not win the next election.
It's an assumption I'm unwilling to contemplate. I'm willing to contemplate.
Are there plans? Are the plans solid, solidly in place for the next 4 years or the next 8 years?
I mean, we have the benefit of highly cerebral Omolu, a big governor in Ogun State. He always says he's the God of all of Ogun State and for all times. As she has rightly said, in fact, we inherited certain projects from previous administrations, and because they are valuable and critical to the people of Ogun State, he's continuing with them. His mission is not only to have his own impact, but to lay the foundations for the prosperity of Ogun State. Whether he is a governor of Ogun State or not, we are all citizens of Ogun State. And therefore, he continues to have an interest in the well-being of all of Ogun State, east, west, or central. So the policy work we're doing, the planning we're doing is to lay the foundations. And then is a person that approaches his job. I don't know if you've listened to him often, you hear that he's methodical in his approach, he's deliberate in his approach, he's focused in his approach, he's consultative in his approach, and that's how he approaches all these assignments to ensure that he does what is necessary. We're working with significant, important partners, so that when these projects themselves or these plans and policies are being implemented, I think it will be very difficult for subsequent incoming administrations to ignore them, because they are designed for the benefit of the population, wherever you may be in Ogun State. So it's not a parochial thing, it's not a politically driven agenda, but one that is designed to improve the socio-economic fabric of Ogun State.
We have seen the buses, the yellow buses, and I mean, people, residents of Abeokuta, at least those that I've seen, are quite excited about those buses. Wi-Fi enabled buses, air conditioned, and all that. Now, going forward, what will these buses add to the economy of the state, and how, I mean, you've actually, they have been strategically put in places, I mean, to run some routes that are quite strategic. But going forward, next year, year after next, what would they really add to the economy of the state?
Well, the transport scheme we refer to is the one between Agata and Itaoshi. It's a pilot project, one that will enable us to learn a lot about what it will take to implement and to run and execute formal transport systems across all of Ogun State. So it's a bit of a learning process, both on our side, and also we're introducing a new product to people of Ogun State, at least here in Abeokuta, to start off with. What I would like to know, we must accept that transport costs are significant, or takes up a significant proportion of people's disposable income. Really, you understand what I mean by that. The average person who earns 20,000 naira a month on income, after paying his or her taxes and some important expenditure, you will find that transport is quite high there. So as a government, we're interested in lowering the cost of transportation. And that frees up our people to have resources for other activities that are critical and important to the well-being and the wellness even of people. And that's one of the aims and ambitions of the transport plan that we have. But of course, it must also provide connectivity to where people want to go. So whether you want to go to work, you want to go to school, hospitals, and so on, you must have easy, safe, accessible, and affordable transport. We don't want everybody to think that, especially these days when private transport is becoming very expensive, that you all have to go and acquire or look for resources to acquire private transportation. Public transportation, I think, is there because it provides the economies of scale. So rather than you and I traveling around in individual vehicles, if we all club together, that's what public transport does. And we all assemble in a vehicle that is comfortable, air-conditioned, Wi-Fi enabled, then we can still undertake the same kind of experience and journey we would have done in a private vehicle, in a public vehicle, at a significantly lower cost. Freeing up other resources, personal resources, to train our children, to support our families, even to invest in other areas of our economy. So that's the idea behind formal public transportation. And it's to also, in our environment, to try and begin to reduce the reliance on the informal sector. And the challenge of the informal sector is that we are finding that they are pricey, i.e. expensive, expensive in terms of the amount of disposable income it takes from our people. And they are generally unsafe. Most of us won't like to see our daughters, our women, our sisters, pregnant and so on, going to hospital on the back of a motorcycle taxi. So it's the vision of the planning for Ogun State to see how we can move away from informal or dependency on informal transportation by introducing the alternative formal transport systems.
You said earlier on that you work with Trace and other agencies, What have you been able to do about the truck drivers, the recklessness of the truck drivers?
Yes, I'm afraid that's another pandemic in the Abeokuta area.
Does that mean there's no hope?
No, there is hope, of course, there is hope. Only I think it was last month, a task force was actually established by the ministry comprising the stakeholders in the transport sector, the truck transport business, haulage business, ourselves as the regulator of the sector, the security and the safety teams, Trace, road safety, VIO, all of us together to begin to see how we can all come together and arrive at a common, to agree the common problem and then a common solution. Because so far in the past, my experience has been that government or us as the regulator, we seem to impose our ideas as to how we can resolve this problem. But us coming together in the task force, we've all agreed, whether you are the driver of a truck, you are the owner of a truck, or an operator of a truck, we all accept now that there's a problem. So now that we all accept there's a problem, what can we all do in our own individual capacities to begin to address this particular problem? The reason I mentioned pandemic to start off with was that recently, as you've identified, there have been major improvements in our road system. The Shagamu interchange is an example, the Ijebu-Akpere is another one, and there are several others scattered across Ogun State. But what we are seeing is that the vast majority of these users, especially the truck drivers, they are speeding, increasing their traffic speeds. They are parking even on these roads, and basically they are beginning to take away from the benefits that we were hoping to achieve by developing these corridors. And clearly something has to be done about that. The good news is that we all agree.
And I think that's something that you need to...
Yeah,
that will certainly affect the ambience of that